The Coalition Naval Academy's marksmanship wing hummed with the quiet symphony of modern warfare. Neural-linked smart rifles clicked and whispered as cadets from across the Orion Spur synchronized their targeting implants with weapon systems that could calculate a firing solution across 300 kilometers of moving debris field. Every surface gleamed with smart glass displays and adaptive holographic interfaces. Every cadet moved with the fluid certainty of beings who had never known a world without computational combat assistance. Then Cadet Corbin Voss walked in carrying what looked like a museum piece. The scope was blackened steel with brass adjustment turrets, mounted on a bolt-action chassis that had clearly seen decades of use. No data ports, no adaptive reticule, no AI-assisted anything, just glass and metal worn smooth in places where generations of human hands had gripped it. The Viren cadets noticed first. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, slender and graceful, their large eyes adapted for low-light hunting on their homeworld. One of them, a male named Sulin, let his gaze drift from his own liquid crystal targeting monocle to the primitive device in Voss's hands. His nostril slits flared with something between amusement and disbelief. "Is that a ceremonial piece?" Sulin asked, his translated voice carrying the melodic condescension his species had perfected over 300 years of diplomatic dominance. "Humans sometimes carry ancestral weapons for ritual purposes, correct?" A Skolty cadet clicked his 4 mandibles together in what passed for laughter among his kind. "Perhaps she intends to bludgeon the targets into submission." The owl observers rippled with phosphorescent patterns of mirth. Their gelatinous bodies quivered inside their environmental suits. Voss said nothing. She walked to lane 7, the last position on the range, farthest from the instructor's podium. Her movements were deliberate. She placed the rifle on the bench, opened a small leather case, and removed a single-lens cloth. The fabric was old, faded, embroidered with initials too worn to read. She began cleaning the scope's objective lens with slow, circular motions that looked almost meditative. The range computer chimed as it attempted to interface with her weapon. A pleasant synthetic voice announced, "Error. No compatible targeting module detected. Please connect a Coalition-standard SmartLink device." Voss ignored it. She continued cleaning. "Cadet Voss," Sulin pressed, stepping closer. "The simulation begins in 3 minutes. You cannot possibly intend to use that artifact. The refraction index on uncoated lenses alone would render mid-range shots impossible. The glare signature would give away your position in any real engagement. This is basic optical physics." Voss finished cleaning the lens. She held it up to the overhead lights, inspecting it with one eye closed. Satisfied, she lowered the scope and finally looked at Sulin. Her eyes were pale gray, unremarkable by Coalition standards. No enhanced spectral range, no adaptive pupil dilation, just human eyes set in a human face that betrayed nothing. "How many battles have you fought?" she asked. Sulin's head tilted. "Simulated 412, all ranked superior." "I mean real ones, where you bleed when you lose." The Viren cadet's elegant features tightened. "The Coalition has maintained peace for 2 centuries. Real battles are historical abstractions." Voss nodded slowly. She mounted the scope onto her rifle with a precise click that echoed in the sudden quiet. Several nearby cadets had stopped their preparations to watch the exchange. "Then you've never seen what happens when the network goes down," she said. "When the jammers hit and your SmartLink becomes a paperweight. When the AI can't compensate because it's never seen this kind of atmosphere, this gravity well, this particular flavor of chaos." She tapped the steel tube of her scope. "This has." A shadow fell across the firing lane. War Master Vex moved with the deliberate weight of someone who had survived things that killed lesser beings. His species, the Tavere, were built like walking siege engines, broad, dense, covered in pebbled hide the color of old bruises. Half his face was reconstructed with burnished metal plating. His right eye was a mechanical iris that whirred softly as it focused. He had been standing at the observation podium, silent, for the past 90 seconds. Nobody had noticed him approach. Now he loomed behind Voss's firing position, his massive frame blocking the overhead lights. The mechanical eye clicked through several aperture settings as it examined her weapon. His organic eye, bloodshot and amber, fixed on the scope. The range went quiet. Even the Scolti stopped clicking their mandibles. Vex leaned down. His scarred fingers, each one thicker than a human thumb, reached toward the scope but did not touch it. He simply hovered there, his face inches from the worn steel tube, breathing slowly. The cadets exchanged glances. A War Master showing hesitation was like seeing a star flicker. It simply didn't happen. When Vex spoke, his voice was the sound of tectonic plates grinding together. "Where did you get this?" Voss didn't flinch. She didn't shrink. She met the War Master's gaze with those pale gray eyes and answered with the calm of someone who had been waiting her whole life for this question. "It was my mother's, and her mother before that, and her father's before her." Vex's mechanical eye whirred faster. The iris dilated, contracted, dilated again, scanning, measuring, recognizing. "This scope," he said slowly, straightening to his full height, "has human blood etched into its finish. I can see the scoring, the impact damage, the field repairs." He turned to face the assembled cadets, and his voice dropped to something that was barely above a growl. "It has seen more combat than every cadet in this room combined. You would do well to stop laughing." The silence that followed was absolute. Vex turned back to Voss. "Range 7, Dawn, bring nothing but this rifle." He walked away without another word. The cadets stared at Voss with expressions that were no longer mocking. Confusion, suspicion, and beneath it all, the first cold tendrils of something they couldn't yet name. Voss picked up her lens cloth and resumed cleaning. The private briefing room stank of old metal and ozone from Vex's cybernetic maintenance cycles. Corbin Voss sat across from the War Master at a table scarred by decades of nervous cadet fingernails, and the occasional plasma scoring from educational demonstrations gone wrong. Vex held the scope in his massive hands with a gentleness that seemed impossible for someone his size. He turned it over, examining the hand-etched markings on the elevation turret. The numbers were engraved by someone who had used a diamond-tipped stylus, not a factory machine. Tiny imperfections marked each digit. Human imperfections. M84I Long-Range Precision Optic, Vex said. Manufactured Earth Year 2047. Billings, Montana. The shop was called Iron Peak Armory. It burned down during the resource wars, but not before producing approximately 400 of these scopes. Most were destroyed in combat. Approximately 12 are known to survive. He looked up. "I have studied human military history extensively. It is a hobby of mine. Would you like to know why?" Voss nodded. "Because in my first command, I lost 12 ships to a human battle group that possessed technology we considered laughably primitive. They had no quantum-linked fire control, no adaptive shielding, no neural interface weapons. They had chemical propellants, steel-jacketed projectiles, and optical scopes much like this one." Vex set the scope down with care. "And they destroyed 12 ships that each outgunned them by a factor of 10. He leaned back, and the chair groaned under his weight. "Tell me its history." Voss looked at the scope on the table between them. The overhead light caught the tiny scratches on the tube, each one a story. "My great-grandmother carried it during the lunar suppression. She was a designated marksman with the 3rd Orbital Infantry. The brass didn't want women in combat, so she enlisted under her brother's name. By the time they figured it out, she'd already made 57 confirmed kills and was training other shooters. They let her stay." Vex's mechanical eye whirred, recording every word. "My grandmother took it to the Jovian blockade. She was a ship-to-ship sniper. You ever hear about that? No, most people haven't. She would sit in a depressurized observation blister with a vacuum-rated rifle and put rounds through the viewports of enemy gunboats. 32 ship kills. The scope froze over twice. She thought it with her own breath because the heating elements had been shot out. "And your mother?" Vex asked. "Battle of Kepler Scar." Voss's voice didn't change, but something behind her eyes shifted. She held a ridge for 6 hours with 12 other shooters. Coalition forces had the high ground, orbital support, drone swarms, everything. But a solar flare knocked out the drone control network and the orbital platforms couldn't get a clean firing solution through the debris field. So they sent in ground troops, wave after wave. Voss touched the scope. Mom was the only survivor from her position. When reinforcements arrived, they found her still firing, still adjusting, still hitting targets at ranges the enemy thought were safe. She'd run out of water 18 hours earlier. She'd been bleeding from shrapnel wounds for 12, but she kept shooting. Vex was quiet for a long moment. "The Coalition's standard targeting AI can calculate a firing solution in 0.002 seconds, he said. "It compensates for atmospheric density, gravity fluctuations, Coriolis drift, target movement prediction, and 17 other variables. Your scope requires you to calculate all of this manually. It is objectively inferior technology." "Is it?" Voss asked. Vex's organic eye narrowed. "An AI can be spoofed," she continued. "Jammed, hacked, overloaded, shut down by an EMP burst, compromised by a software update pushed by an enemy intelligence agency, corrupted by cosmic radiation, bricked by a power failure, and every single one of those failure modes has happened in real combat." She tapped the scope. "This doesn't care about network integrity. It doesn't need a power source. It doesn't run on software that can be corrupted. It's glass and steel and brass. It works in a vacuum. It works underwater. It works in an EMP storm. It works when the ship's reactor is cold and the backup batteries are dead and the AI is nothing but scrambled code." She leaned forward. "You want to know how Earth won wars? We won them because when the technology failed, and technology always fails, our soldiers could still fight. We never forgot that machines are tools, not replacements. The scope is a tool. The mind using it is the weapon." Vex stared at her. The mechanical eye whirred softly. Then he stood, and the chair scraped back with a sound like a warning. "Range 7, Dawn, do not be late." He walked out, leaving Voss alone with the scope and the weight of 3 generations of war. Range 7 was not a firing range. It was a decommissioned Corvette-class warship, a Scolti light harrower, 72 meters long, gutted and stripped of its reactor, but otherwise intact. The vessel floated in the center of a massive null-gravity containment sphere, tethered by magnetic cables that kept it from drifting into the walls. Inside the ship, the corridors were dark, twisted, filled with the detritus of a vessel that had seen combat and been dragged back from the edge of destruction. 12 targets had been placed throughout the ship. Some moved on randomized tracks. Some were stationary but hidden behind microdebris fields or gravity-lensed mirage zones. Some were rigged to ambient ECM bursts that would fry any unprotected electronics within 5 meters. The alien cadets gathered at the observation platform, looking down through armored viewports at the floating wreck. Sulin stood apart from the others, his elegant features unreadable. Krith, the Scolti who had mocked Voss the day before, kept clicking his mandibles in a rhythm that his species used to express anxiety. Lurin, the owl, rippled with patterns of deep violet, the color of wounded pride. Vex stood at the platform's edge, his mechanical eye reflecting the dim emergency lights of the dead ship below. "The exercise is straightforward," he announced. 12 targets, 90 seconds. You will enter through the forward airlock, navigate to the bridge, and engage any target you encounter. The ship's internal environment is randomized. You may experience gravity fluctuations between 0.1 and 2.5 standard Gs, atmospheric density shifts, optical distortion fields, localized EMP bursts. Your neural targeting networks will be disabled for the duration of the exercise. A ripple of alarm passed through the cadets. Disabled, Krith clicked rapidly. War Master, our weapons are calibrated for network-linked fire control. Without it, the recoil compensation alone would require you to actually know how to shoot, Vex finished. Yes, that is the point. He turned to Voss. Cadet Voss, you will go first. She nodded, slung her rifle across her back, and stepped onto the transport platform. The magnetic locks disengaged, and she drifted down toward the dead ship's forward airlock. The cadets watched through the viewports as she cycled through the airlock and disappeared into the dark interior. The timer started. Inside the harrower, the darkness was absolute except for the faint glow of emergency lighting strips that flickered and died at irregular intervals. Voss moved through the first corridor with her scope mounted and ready. The gravity was at 0.3 g, light enough to make every step a controlled float, heavy enough to require adjustment for ballistic drop. First target. A drone popped out from behind a collapsed bulkhead, moving fast on randomized thrusters. Voss didn't hesitate. She tracked it through the scope, adjusted for the low gravity, and fired. The round caught the drone's center mass. It spiraled into a wall and went dark. Second target. A pop-up behind a torn conduit. She dropped to one knee, sighted, fired, hit. The ship groaned around her. The gravity suddenly spiked to 1.8 g. Voss grunted, adjusted her stance, and kept moving. Third target, fourth, fifth. On the observation platform, the cadets watched the targeting display. Each hit registered as a green flash. The green flashes were coming rapidly now, one after another. This is impossible, Sulin murmured. She's not using any assistance, no range finder, no ballistic computer. How is she compensating for the gravity shifts? Vex said nothing, he simply watched. Sixth target. It was hidden behind a mirage zone, a localized heat shimmer generated by tactical emitters that bent light into a distorted curtain. The drone behind it was effectively invisible to any optical system relying on standard line of sight. Voss looked through her scope. She saw the distortion. She adjusted her point of aim based on the refraction pattern, something no AI would have been programmed to recognize because it was a purely analog phenomenon. She fired. The round passed through the distortion zone, its trajectory bending slightly, and struck the drone exactly where she had predicted. Seventh, eighth, ninth. The ship lurched. A localized EMP burst detonated in the corridor ahead, strong enough to fry any unprotected electronics. The smart weapons the other cadets carried would have been bricked instantly. Voss's scope didn't even flicker. 10th, 11th. The final target was in the bridge. Voss kicked through the hatch, floated into the command center, and found the drone. It was moving in an erratic spiral around the captain's chair, shielded by a micro-debris field of spinning metal fragments. A nightmare shot for any targeting system. Voss settled into a firing position against the bulkhead. She dialed her elevation turret 3 clicks. She breathed out. She squeezed. The drone shattered. The timer stopped at 73 seconds. On the observation platform, nobody spoke. The display showed 12 green hits, no misses, and a completion time that was 17 seconds faster than the Academy record for any simulated combat exercise at this difficulty level. War Master Vex turned to face the cadets, his mechanical eye whirred as it focused on each of them in turn. Then he spoke, and his voice carried the weight of someone who had learned this lesson through blood and fire, and the wreckage of ships he would never get back. That, he said, is how Earth won wars. The silence stretched. Krith's mandibles had stopped clicking entirely. Lurin's phosphorescence had faded to a dull gray. Sulin stared at the display with an expression that his species had no word for, because the Viren had never needed one for what they were feeling now. It was the realization that everything they knew about warfare was built on a foundation of sand. The debriefing room was thick with the scent of alien stress pheromones. Voss stood at the front of the chamber, her rifle resting on the instructor's podium beside a holographic replay of her run through the Harrower. The cadets sat in a loose semicircle, their postures ranging from defensive to defeated to deeply contemplative. Vex had ordered each of them to attempt a run through Range 7 using only backup iron sights. The results had been catastrophic. Sulin had missed 11 of 12 targets. His typically flawless movements became jerky, and uncertain the moment his neural link went dark. Krith had become so frustrated that he had accidentally discharged his weapon into a console, earning him 3 demerits and a very pointed glare from the War Master. Lurin had simply frozen at the first gravity shift, his gelatinous body quivering in distress, unable to process the manual adjustments required. They were the best shooters in their respective species. They had trained for years, and without their computers they were helpless. "What you are experiencing," Vex said, packing slowly before them, "is not a failure of skill. It is a failure of doctrine. Your species have spent centuries integrating computational assistance into every aspect of warfare. This is not inherently wrong, but it has created a dependency that your enemies have learned to exploit." He gestured to the holographic display, which shifted to show archival combat footage. Human soldiers in battered combat armor, fighting from trenches and ruined buildings. Human ships, blocky and unaesthetic, trading fire with sleek coalition vessels. Human snipers, lying motionless in rubble, peering through scopes that looked identical to the one on the podium. When humanity entered the galactic stage, the Coalition Military Assessment Board conducted a comprehensive evaluation of human combat capability. The report concluded that human forces were technologically insufficient to pose a credible threat to any modern military. Vex paused. That report was declassified 80 years later. By then, humans had won 3 major conflicts against coalition forces. He tapped the display. It shifted to show a tactical map of a battle the cadets didn't recognize. The Battle of Thornwall Nebula. A coalition battle group engaged a smaller human force in what should have been a decisive victory, but the nebula's electromagnetic properties disrupted coalition sensor networks. Targeting computers failed. Drone coordination collapsed. The human ships, which relied on optical targeting and manual fire control, were completely unaffected. They destroyed 17 coalition vessels in 40 minutes. 3,412 coalition personnel died. Human casualties, 86. The cadets stared at the screen. "We adapted," Vex continued. "We hardened our systems. We developed countermeasures. We learned to fight in environments where our technology worked, but we never addressed the fundamental vulnerability. Our warriors need their machines. Human warriors simply use them." He turned to Voss. "Cadet, the shot through the Mirage Zone. Explain how you compensated." Voss stepped forward. She picked up her scope and held it so the cadets could see the elevation turret. "Light bends when it passes through heated gas. The AI in your weapons is programmed to recognize Mirage as an error source and filter it out. It tries to calculate what the target should look like without the distortion, then gives you a corrected image. The problem is, the correction is only as good as the algorithm. In an environment the AI hasn't been trained on, the correction can be wrong." She pointed at the turret markings. "I don't filter out the distortion. I read it. Heat shimmer has predictable behavior patterns. The amount of distortion tells you the temperature differential. The direction of the shimmer tells you the air currents. Once you know those, you can calculate where the target actually is and aim there instead of where it appears to be." Krith clicked his mandibles slowly. "You do this manually, in real time, while being shot at." "That's the other thing," Voss said. "We don't see it as a separate task. The calculations aren't something we stop and do. They're part of the shooting, like breathing." Lurin's phosphorescence flickered with a pattern that his species used to indicate deep cognitive dissonance. How long does it take to learn this? My mother started teaching me when I was 6. I took my first live fire shot at 8. By 12, I could hit a moving target at 1,200 meters without assistance. Voss shrugged. It's not special. Any human who grows up in a military family learns it. It's just training. Vex let that hang in the air. The difference, he said quietly, between a tool and a crutch is what happens when it's taken away. Humanity never forgot this. The rest of us did. Krith raised a clawed hand. His mandibles were trembling slightly. War Master, may I look through the scope? Voss glanced at Vex. He nodded. She walked to Krith's seat and handed him the rifle. The Skolty cadet held it awkwardly. The ergonomics were wrong for his four-armed frame, the stock designed for human shoulders. But he raised the scope to his primary eye and looked through it. What he saw was not a targeting system. There were no holographic overlays, no threat indicators, no range calculations or atmospheric readouts or shot probability percentages, just a circle of clear glass with tiny etched lines radiating from the center. A mil-dot reticle, hand-engraved, slightly uneven where the diamond stylus had slipped 3 generations ago. Krith lowered the scope. It's just glass, he said. Yes, Voss said. And lines. Yes. And you can hit a moving target at 2,000 meters with nothing but glass and lines. With glass, lines, and 30 years of accumulated knowledge passed down through my family, Voss corrected. The scope doesn't do the work. It just shows me where to put my eye. Everything else is up here. She tapped her temple. Krith handed the rifle back with the careful reverence of someone handling a relic he didn't quite understand, but was beginning to suspect might be more important than anything he had ever been taught. Lurin rose from his seat. His gelatinous form quivered with the effort of maintaining a humanoid shape under emotional stress. I wish to challenge you, he said. The room went still. A formal duel, Lurin continued. Full interference conditions, active jamming, optical distortion, randomized gravity spikes. If you win, I will concede the validity of your methods and participate in whatever remedial training the War Master deems appropriate. His phosphorescence flared bright orange, the color of formal challenge among the owl. If I win, you will surrender that scope for technological deconstruction. Voss's expression didn't change. She looked at Lurin for a long moment. And by deconstruction, you mean destruction? Yes. The other cadets shifted uncomfortably. Even Sulin looked taken aback by the demand. Voss set her rifle down on the podium. She ran her fingers along the worn steel of the scope tube, tracing the scratches that told the story of her family's wars. Then she looked up at Lurin with those pale gray eyes. I accept, but I have my own stakes. If I win, every cadet in this room commits to 1 week of training with no computer assistance whatsoever. No neural links, no smart weapons, no targeting AI, just iron sights, optical scopes, and your own 2 eyes. Lurin's phosphorescence flickered. That is absurd. We would be unable to function. That's the point, Voss said. You'll learn or you'll fail, but either way you'll understand. Vex stepped forward before Lurin could respond. The challenge is registered. The duel will take place in the Chaos Chamber at 600 tomorrow. Both parties will use Academy standard ammunition and target profiles. The winner will be determined by accuracy, speed, and target priority assessment under full environmental interference. He looked at Voss, then at Lurin. I suggest you both prepare. This will not be a gentle lesson. The night before the duel, the Academy dormitory wing reserved for human cadets was quiet. There were only 7 humans in the entire institution, scattered across different training tracks. The dormitory had been designed for 30, back when the Coalition had hoped more humans would enroll. That was before the Battle of Thornwall Nebula. before the reality of human combat doctrine had made too many species uncomfortable. Corbin Voss sat on her bunk with the M84I disassembled on a cleaning mat before her. She had done this 1,000 times. The movements were automatic, meditative. She removed the turret caps, inspected the O-rings, cleaned the internal lenses with the same faded cloth her mother had used. A knock at her door. She looked up. "Come in." Krith entered, his 4 arms folded in a posture of scolty nervousness. Behind him, Sulin hovered in the doorway, his elegant features arranged in an expression of reluctant curiosity. "We are not here to spy on your preparations," Krith said quickly. "We simply wish to understand." "Understand what?" Sulin stepped inside. "Why you accepted? You could have refused the challenge without loss of standing. Lurin is being unreasonable. Everyone knows this. The deconstruction demand is excessive. Vex would have supported your refusal." Voss returned to cleaning the objective lens. "He would have, but I didn't want to refuse." "Why?" Krith clicked his mandibles. "The scope is clearly valuable to you if you lose." "I won't lose." The statement was matter of fact, not arrogant, not defiant, simply certain. Sulin's large eyes studied her. "How can you be so sure? Lurin is an excellent shooter. His species possesses natural advantages in reaction time and visual processing that humans lack. None of that matters when the computers are off." Voss reassembled the scope with a series of precise clicks. "Lurin has never fired a shot without computational assistance. He's never had to feel the wind on his skin and convert that sensation into a windage adjustment. He's never had to look at heat shimmer and calculate refraction angles in his head. He's never experienced what it's like when everything is quiet and dark, and the only things in the universe are you, the target, and the space between." She looked up at them. "Tomorrow he will, for the first time, and he'll be facing someone who has been doing this since before she could read. That's not arrogance, that's math." Krith sat down heavily on a storage crate. "The War Master said you humans never forgot something we lost. What did he mean?" Voss considered the question. She finished reassembling the scope and set it aside. "Do you know why humans developed marksmanship in the first place? Not as a military skill, as a cultural practice. Before we had cities, we had hunters, men and women who could put a spear through a running animal at 30 meters. When we invented firearms, we didn't abandon those skills. We translated them. The tool changed, but the fundamental human ability, the capacity to look at a moving target, understand its trajectory intuitively, and put a projectile exactly where we want it, that didn't change." She stood and walked to the small viewport that looked out onto the Academy's central courtyard. The twin moons of the host planet cast pale light across the training grounds. "When we reached the stars, we met species who had automated warfare, drones, AI, smart weapons that did all the thinking for you. And for a while some humans thought we should do the same, but we had a problem, our history. Every time we had relied too heavily on technology in war, we had paid for it in blood. So we kept the old skills alive. We taught our children to shoot without computers. We maintained the lineage." "The lineage," Sulin repeated. "You speak of marksmanship as if it were a bloodline." "It is." Voss turned back to face them. "My family has been training snipers for 6 generations. The scope I'm using tomorrow is not just a tool, it's a repository. Every person who has used it has added something. A turret adjustment technique, a method for reading mirage, a breathing pattern. My mother taught me everything she knew. Her mother taught her, and so on. That chain of knowledge goes back centuries." Krith's mandibles clicked slowly. "Among my people, we upload our experiences to the ancestral memory banks. Any Skolti can access the combat knowledge of any ancestor. We do not need lineages." "And if the memory banks go down?" Krith had no answer. "That's the difference," Voss said. "Your knowledge lives in servers, ours lives in people, in hands, in eyes, in the space between heartbeats. You can destroy a server, you can corrupt a database, you can jam a transmission, but you can't hack a human mind. You can't delete what a mother taught her daughter on a hillside range while the sun was setting and the wind was picking up, and every shot had to be perfect because there were no second chances in the world she grew up in. She picked up the scope and held it out to them. This isn't just glass and steel. It's a library. And tomorrow, Lurin is going to find out what happens when he tries to burn a library that has survived 3 wars. Sulin stared at the scope. His large, expressive eyes reflected the pale moonlight. "I believe," he said slowly, "that I have been educated incorrectly about many things." Voss almost smiled. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow, going to be educational for everyone." The Chaos Chamber was a sphere 100 meters in diameter, its interior surface covered in holographic emitters, gravity manipulators, environmental projectors, and an array of jamming devices that could simulate any combat environment from the surface of a neutron star to the depths of a gas giant. At 600 precisely, the observation deck was packed. Every cadet who could obtain clearance had crammed into the viewing gallery. Instructors lined the upper tier, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Even a few administrative staff had found reasons to be present. The rumor of a human cadet challenging an owl to a duel under full interference had spread through the academy like a shockwave. Vex stood at the control podium, his mechanical eye tracking the pre-duel diagnostics. Below, visible through the armored viewports, the Chaos Chamber was a swirling kaleidoscope of environmental chaos. "The duel will consist of 5 engagement phases," Vex announced to the assembled audience. "Each phase lasts 90 seconds. The environment will shift between phases. 15 targets will be deployed per phase, with randomized movement patterns, threat priorities, and concealment conditions. The shooter who scores the most high-priority hits across all 5 phases wins." He paused. "Both shooters will operate under full interference protocols. No neural targeting assistance. No AI fire control. No networked sensors. No drone support. Your weapons will be cold, dumb, and entirely dependent on the shooter behind them." Lurin stood at the chamber's south entrance, his gelatinous form encased in a custom environmental suit. His rifle was a sleek owl design, adaptive optics, redundant shielding, the best non-network technology his species could produce. He had clearly spent the night modifying it for the dual conditions. Voss stood at the north entrance. She carried her bolt-action chassis and the M84I, nothing else. "Enter the chamber," Vex commanded. Phase 1, Low-Orbit Debris Field. The chamber transformed into a simulation of high-orbit combat. Targets drifted through a field of spinning metal fragments. The gravity fluctuated between 0.1 and 0.8 g in unpredictable pulses. Electromagnetic interference screamed across the spectrum. Lurin's adaptive optics struggled. The system was designed to compensate for standard combat environments, not the chaotic unpredictability of a debris field. Each time it adjusted, the environment shifted, forcing another recalibration. Lurin fired rapidly, trying to overwhelm the chaos with volume. Voss settled into a stable position against a bulkhead projection. She tracked the first target through her scope, calculated the gravity shift, and fired. Hit. Second target. Hit. She wasn't fast. She was deliberate. Each shot was a single, perfect calculation. Phase 1 ended. Voss, 8 hits, all high priority. Lurin, 6 hits, 3 high priority. Phase 2, Nebula Gas Immersion. The chamber filled with dense, light-scattering gas that reduced visibility to near zero. Thermal optics were useless. Standard visual acquisition was impossible. Lurin switched to acoustic targeting, sound wave mapping that could detect shapes in the gas. Impressive technology. But the gas was seeded with random noise generators that created phantom echoes. Voss closed her eyes. She listened. The targets made sounds as they moved, subtle sounds, the whir of a thruster, the displacement of gas around a moving object. She had trained for this in sensory deprivation chambers, in blindfold drills, in the absolute darkness of deep space sniper nests. Her scope couldn't see through the gas, but she didn't need to see through it. She just needed to know where the targets were. She fired 5 times, 5 hits. Lurin's acoustic system registered 37 contacts. He fired at all of them. 3 were real. Phase 2 ended. Voss cumulative 13 hits, Lurin cumulative 9 hits. Phase 3, electromagnetic whiteout. Every spectrum was jammed. Radio, infrared, ultraviolet, microwave. All of it screamed with white noise so intense that the observation deck's shielded sensors flickered. Lurin's adaptive optics went completely blind. The scope tried to filter the noise and produced nothing but static. Voss's scope was glass and steel. It didn't care about electromagnetic interference. Light passed through the lenses. The reticle sat where it always sat. She saw the targets because there was nothing between her eye and them except air and glass. 5 more shots, 5 more hits. Lurin fired blindly into the noise. 2 hits, both luck. Phase 3 ended. Voss 18 hits, Lurin 11 hits. Phase 4, gravity chaos. The chamber's gravity generators went insane. The simulation shifted to a collapsing orbital platform. Gravity spiked to 3G, dropped to 0.2G, reverse direction, twisted laterally. The targets moved in paths that defied prediction. Lurin's physical form began to falter. The owl were not built for rapid gravity shifts. His gelatinous body quivered with the effort of maintaining coherence. His shots went wide. Voss had trained in variable gravity since childhood. Her mother had taken her to a high-G centrifuge range when she was 10 and made her shoot until she stopped missing. The adjustments were muscle memory now. Her body compensated automatically, shifting her stance, altering her point of aim. 5 shots, 4 hits. The one miss was a target that reversed direction mid-shot, a maneuver that would have fooled any shooter, human or otherwise. Phase 4 ended. Voss 22 hits, Lurin 13 hits. Phase 5, the final target. The chamber went dark. All environmental effects ceased. A single drone emerged from the center of the sphere, behind a curtain of heat shimmer so intense that the air itself seemed to warp and twist. 1 shot, Vex announced. 1 target, winner takes all. Lurin fired first. His adaptive optics tried to compensate for the heat distortion. The system calculated, recalculated, adjusted. The shot went wide, deflected by a refraction pattern the computer had misread. Voss raised her scope. The shimmer curtain was identical to the one she had described in the debriefing. The heat created predictable refraction patterns. She studied the distortion, identified the temperature differential from the shimmer's behavior, calculated the offset. She dialed her elevation turret 3 clicks. She breathed out. She squeezed. The round passed through the distortion zone. Its trajectory bent as it hit the heat gradient, curving slightly in the superheated air. It struck the drone center mass. The drone shattered. The chamber lights rose. The environmental effects cleared. And in the sudden quiet, Lurin stood motionless, staring at the wreckage of the final target, his phosphorescence flickering through colors the other cadets had never seen before. He turned to Voss. His voice, when it came through the translator, was stripped of all pride. "Teach me." Voss lowered her rifle. The M84I steel tube gleamed in the overhead lights, its scratches and scars and hand-etched markings telling the story that words could not fully capture. "That was always the deal," she said, 7 days. 168 hours of dawn drills on range 7, iron sights and optical scopes, no networks, no computers, no crutches. The first 3 days were a massacre. Sulin couldn't hit a stationary target at 500 meters. His neural link withdrawal was almost physical. He kept reaching for controls that weren't there, expecting data that never arrived. Twice, he threw his rifle down in frustration. Twice, Krith retrieved it and pushed it back into his hands. Your ancestors did not have computers, Krith clicked at him. They hunted with spears. You are descended from predators, act like it. Sulin hated him for saying it, but he kept shooting. Lurin struggled with the physical mechanics of shooting without assistance. His gelatinous form lacked rigid bone structure, making recoil management a nightmare. Voss spent 2 hours with him on the 4th day, teaching him how to brace against environmental suit hardpoints, how to let his body absorb the shock in waves rather than fighting it. I thought humans were fragile, Lurin said after finally landing 3 consecutive hits. Your bones break, your tissues tear, you have no natural armor. We're fragile, Voss agreed. That's why we had to get smart. We couldn't afford to get hit. So we learned to hit first from farther away in conditions the enemy thought were impossible. It's not about strength. It's about refusing to accept that the shot can't be made. On the 5th day, something shifted. Krith was the first to make a difficult shot, a moving target at 800 meters through simulated rain. He did it without thinking. His hands moved before his conscious mind caught up, adjusting for windage and elevation in a single fluid motion. The target dropped. Krith stared at his rifle as if seeing it for the first time. I felt it, he said. The calculation, it was not words, not numbers. It was like a shape in my mind, the trajectory. I could feel it before I fired. Voss nodded. That's what I've been trying to tell you. It's not math. It's not a formula you memorize. It's a sense, like balance, like proprioception. Your brain already knows how to calculate trajectories. You evolved to throw things, to catch things, to predict where a moving object will be. The scope just gives your brain the information it needs to do what it already knows how to do. By the 6th day, even Sulin was hitting moving targets. On the 7th day, Vex assembled them all on range 7 for a final exercise. The harrower course same as before, 12 targets, full interference, no assistance. Sulin went first. His elegant Viren hands, which had once trembled without neural guidance, now moved with quiet confidence. He missed 2 shots but hit 10, a passing grade. Krith hit 11. His four-armed grip, awkward with human weapons, had adapted to the point where his additional limbs became an advantage. He could brace the rifle in ways no human could. Lurin hit 9. Not perfect, but when he emerged from the harrower, his phosphorescence was a steady, proud gold. Voss went last, 12 targets, 12 hits, 78 seconds. When the exercise ended, Vex gathered them in the observation deck. The War Master's mechanical eye swept across the assembled cadets, lingering on each face, alien and human alike. 7 days ago, he said, most of you could not hit a stationary target without computational assistance. Today, you completed a course that would challenge any active-duty marksman. This is not because you have become better shots. It is because you have remembered something your species forgot. He gestured toward Voss. Humanity entered the galactic community with technology we considered obsolete. We mocked them for it. We dismissed their methods as primitive, their weapons as relics, their doctrine as anachronistic. And then we fought them. And we lost. Not because they had better technology, because they had something we had abandoned. He let the silence stretch. They had skill, real skill. The kind that doesn't come from a computer. The kind that lives in the hands and the eyes and the space between heartbeats. The kind that can be passed down through generations but can never be downloaded. Admiral Sierra Voss had been standing at the back of the observation deck for the past 10 minutes. Nobody had noticed her arrive. She was shorter than her daughter, broader in the shoulders, with a prosthetic left arm that gleamed dully in the dim light. Her face was lined with age and old burns, and the quiet weight of someone who had survived everything the galaxy had thrown at her. She stepped forward. War Master Vex speaks of skill, she said, her voice carrying the same calm certainty as her daughter's. But he's being polite. What he means is that the coalition forgot how to fight. You built machines that fought for you, and when those machines failed, you had nothing left. Humanity never had the luxury of forgetting. Our machines were never good enough to rely on, so we relied on ourselves. She walked to where her daughter stood and placed her hand, her real hand, flesh and bone and scars, on the M84I scope. This scope has been rebuilt 3 times. The original lenses shattered during the lunar suppression. My grandmother replaced them with glass from a civilian telescope she found on Ganymede. The turret assembly was destroyed by shrapnel at Kepler Scar. My mother rebuilt it with parts from a damaged rangefinder she pulled off a dead enemy scout. The reticle was hand-etched by my great-grandmother, because the factory reticle had been calibrated for Earth atmosphere, and she needed something that worked in vacuum. She looked at the assembled cadets, her pale gray eyes, the same as her daughter's, moving from face to face. We don't keep this scope because it's old. We keep it because it remembers how to fight when everything else forgets. It has survived 3 wars, 4 generations, and every attempt to render it obsolete. It will survive me, and it will survive my daughter, and one day it will survive her daughter too, because that's what humans do. We survive. We adapt. We remember. She turned to Voss and handed her the scope. And we teach. Below the observation deck, on range 7, Corbin Voss adjusted a Viren cadet's grip on an iron-sighted rifle. The M84I rested on the bench beside her, its worn steel gleaming softly under the range lights. "Loosen your shoulder," she said. "You're fighting the recoil before it happens. Let it come. Trust your position." Sulin adjusted, breathed, fired. The target at 900 meters rang with a clean hit. He lowered the rifle and looked at Voss with an expression that, on a human face, would have been called wonder. "It feels different," he said. "When the computer does it, I am watching. When I do it myself, I am participating." Voss nodded. "That's the secret. The computer makes you an observer. The scope makes you a shooter. There's a difference." She picked up the M84I and ran her thumb along the worn turret cap, feeling the tiny scratches that told the story of her family's wars. "A big difference," she said. And in the quiet of the range, with the scent of propellant in the air and the echo of distant gunfire rolling through the training bays, the next generation of coalition shooters learned what humanity had always known. Technology fails, networks crash, computers can be hacked, jammed, spoofed, and destroyed. But skill, real skill, earned in blood and sweat and passed down through generations, that survives. The scope clicked softly as she dialed in for the next demonstration. Not a bang, just the quiet, certain sound of humanity doing what it had always done. Remembering how to fight.